Today, I'm going to share with you one of the greatest secrets to life. We're talking about some indigenous knowledge, some native wisdom that will improve your health and well-being and will literally change the way you look. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Dr. B Teaches and the 7 Generation Podcast, where we explore the synergy of modern science and indigenous wisdom for a healthier future, 7 generations, and beyond. I'm your host, Dr. B, and today we're diving into a topic that sounds almost too simple to be so powerful. I'm talking about the way that we breathe. We'll be talking about George Catlin, a lawyer turned painter who documented over 50 tribes on the Great Plains and beyond. We will also explore how the observations that George Catlin made on Native Americans now mesh with modern science on nose breathing, sleep apnea, and overall health. So let's get comfortable and breathe our way into one of the greatest secrets to life. Let's start with the basics. Why is breathing so important? Well, you can go days without food or water, but just a few minutes without breath and you'll pass out, or even worse. Breathing is literally the foundation of life. But there's more to this than simply inhaling and exhaling. How you breathe, whether through your nose or your mouth, can profoundly affect your health. Mouth breathing can dry out your mouth and airways, contribute to issues like sleep apnea, alter facial structure, and lead to dental problems. Nasal breathing, on the other hand, helps filter, warm, and humidify the air, lowers your stress levels, and may even reduce the risk of respiratory infections and chronic diseases. From a Western medical standpoint, we often focus on diagnosing and treating lung or airway issues after they develop. But indigenous perspectives on health and wellness frequently center on a more preventive and holistic approach. And that's exactly what George Catlin discovered when he lived among these indigenous communities. So who is George Catlin and why should we care about him? He was born in Pennsylvania in 1796, initially trained as a lawyer, but found his true calling as an artist. He left his legal career to travel west, determined to capture the lives and cultures of many indigenous nations that most Americans at this time, especially those on the East Coast, knew very little about. So from 1830 to 1836, Catlin would spend extended periods of time living among dozens of tribes, painting portraits of their leaders and documenting their everyday life. Many European settlers at this time feared and misunderstood indigenous communities, labeling them as savages and uncivilized, but Catlin saw something different. He recorded not just these amazing paintings, but also took extensive notes on their customs, spiritual practices, their diets, and their overall health and wellness. One of the most shocking observations that Catlin made during his time living among these indigenous communities was just how healthy indigenous people were. He didn't see any cases of chronic disease or malnutrition, and something that he noticed was that all indigenous people had straight and strong teeth, even though that they never saw a dentist. He also observed that indigenous people just looked incredibly healthy, had really beautiful skin, and absolutely beautiful faces. And you might ask yourself, why did this intrigue Catlin so much? Well, the world that he came from, people had rotten teeth, maybe didn't have any teeth at all. Also, the general health of Europeans at this time isn't all that wonderful, and it's not uncommon to see people with various skin diseases and facial deformities. So during this time spent among Native Americans, Catlin believes that he found what Native Americans call one of the greatest secrets to life, and that's nasal breathing. Wherever he travels, Native Americans share with him the importance of breathing through your nose. And this made such an impact on Catlin that he actually wrote a book titled Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life. In the book, Catlin describes how mothers would gently close their infants' mouths after feeding, ensuring that they would learn to breathe through their noses, and that they would do this very early on to train their children not to breathe through their mouth. By doing so, these indigenous communities nurtured strong respiratory systems, broad dental arches, and low levels of overall illness. And George Catlin was amazed by this. In his book, Catlin would write, "The air that enters the lungs through the mouth is as different from that which enters the nostrils as distilled water is from the water in an ordinary cistern or a frog pond." Now, I know that might sound a bit dramatic, but modern science actually backs this up. When you breathe through your nose, you filter out particles, you warm and moisten the air and create nitric oxide, which helps with blood flow and improves your immune function. This is backed up by science. Catlin would also later travel to South America and visit indigenous communities there, and he found the same thing. Indigenous peoples in South America also promoted nasal breathing as a way to maintain overall good health and wellness. Now, from the indigenous point of view, Catlin's findings weren't exactly big news. Native communities have teachings passed down for generations emphasizing that breath is life. Elders often stress that our breath connects us to our spirits, to one another, to the land. The notion that we should guard the purity of our breath aligns perfectly with an ethos of harmony and respect for our natural surroundings and our overall health and wellness. Historically, these lessons on nasal breathing were not taught as scientific lecture. They were demonstrated in everyday life, like indigenous mothers making sure that their infants would breathe through their noses. That's hands-on, everyday indigenous cultural knowledge that we can employ here today. What was fascinating and considered to be this incredible discovery by George Catlin was an everyday practice among indigenous peoples, not just in the Western Hemisphere, but all over the world. Today, researchers and health professionals are rediscovering what indigenous peoples have known forever, that you need to breathe through your nose. And we have scientific studies showing that mouth breathing can contribute to a long list of health issues. Number one is sleep apnea and snoring. Breathing through your mouth, especially at night, can lead to or exacerbate sleep apnea. And this is a serious condition that can devastate your overall health. Chronic mouth breathing is also linked to cavities and dental issues. It can literally change the way you look. Mouth breathing can also lead to reduced oxygen efficiency and respiratory infections. It's really bad to breathe through your mouth. Breathing through your nose is essential for good health, for a strong immune system, and a beautiful face. Nasal breathing slows down the airflow, allowing the lungs and the bloodstream to absorb oxygen more effectively and produce more nitric oxide. This is going to lead to a healthier body and less disease. So when entire communities prioritize nasal breathing from birth, you end up with people who have less disease, less illnesses, no sleep apnea, no snoring, and a really beautiful face and body. And this is what European colonizers saw wherever they went throughout the Western Hemisphere. They encountered people who were well-built, healthy, straight, strong teeth, no facial deformities, no skin problems, almost perfect overall health and wellness. Of course, genocidal policies, settler colonial structures, and the attempted eradication of indigenous cultures has led to the decline of our overall health and wellness. Now, how do we apply these indigenous lessons in this modern world that we live in? Well, the really cool thing is that nasal breathing doesn't require us to go to a gym or to have any special equipment. We can start doing this right now. And when I started learning about what our ancestors practice in terms of breathing through our noses, gently inhaling, gently exhaling, and focusing on keeping our mouth shut and breathing through our nose, I started to do this every morning. And this is something that all of you can do. And I have a very simple routine. I'll breathe in through my nose for 5 to 6 seconds slowly, and I'll exhale for 5 to 6 seconds slowly. And I'll repeat that for as long as 10 minutes. I'll go a little bit longer if I can, but you can just start by doing this a couple minutes throughout the day, maybe once in the morning, again in the afternoon, and again in the evening. I also have a breathing technique that I use that helps me get to sleep. This one's a little different. So I'll breathe in a little faster for 4 seconds, and I'll hold my breath for anywhere from 10 to 12 seconds, and then I exhale really slowly. So I'll breathe in for 4 seconds, I'll hold it for 10 to 12 seconds, and I exhale real slowly all through my nose. And if I do that for a couple of minutes, it knocks me right out. If you do suspect that you are snoring at night, if your partner's telling you like, hey, you're snoring, it's getting louder and louder, or you're sleeping with your mouth open, you definitely want to go see a medical professional and see if it's causing you any health issues. Because if this goes on for an extended period of time, it can really devastate your health. So for those of you who are athletes or really physical, when you work out or you do whatever physical activity, whatever sport that you're doing, do your best to focus on breathing through your nose, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your nose. This is something that I started doing training jiu-jitsu. When I learned a little bit about how this would improve your performance, I started applying this to my jiu-jitsu training, and it just helped me with my overall endurance. And there's a lot of science that backs this claim up that if you breathe through your nose, you will improve your physical and athletic performance. But you don't have to be an athlete or indigenous to benefit from nasal breathing. Obviously, I mean, some of you live incredibly stressful lives. I know that my life is really busy, and whenever I get stressed out, this is one of the things I do. I just sit down, I find a quiet place, and I just focus on my breath. I do what we call breath work. And there's a really great book. It's titled Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. It's by James Nestor. It's a terrific book, and he has several scientific studies that he cites in the book. And he also talks about a lot of different types of breath work that you can do. And he writes a little bit about George Catlin and Native Americans in this book. So I definitely recommend it. You want to get a better performance out of your athletic activities, definitely check out that book. But of course, breath work is only one factor in contributing to your overall health and wellness. We also have to eat well. We have to do our best to reduce our stress, to get good sleep. There's some people who burn the candle at both ends, have all kinds of stress in their life. And if you take care of that, you eat well, you get some good rest, and you focus on nasal breathing, you will improve your overall health and wellness. And we have scientific data showing the physiological benefits of nasal breathing. So it's pretty clear there is something to this ancient indigenous knowledge that has kept our bodies strong, our face is beautiful, and our teeth straight for generations. So integrating this ancient indigenous wisdom into your routine can be a game changer. We're talking about less stress, better sleep, and overall a stronger, healthier immune system. I hope this episode has inspired you to pay attention to your breath and possibly adopt some of these practices into your daily life. And don't forget, you can check out James Nestor's book, Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. He has some really, really great information in here. But just remember, the way that you breathe should be a mindful act. It's a way to honor your body and the generations of knowledge that's been passed down to us by our ancestors. Thank you for joining me on Dr. B Teaches and the 7th Generation Podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. My podcast, the 7th Generation Podcast, streams on all the major platforms. Just search the 7th Generation Podcast. As always, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is 7gen Podcast. I'm also on TikTok. My handle there is Merciless Savages. Today I shared with you one of the greatest secrets to life, that breath is sacred. So don't forget to breathe through your nose. Take care of your health, your wellness, reduce your stress, and we'll see you real soon.